Welcome to Mental Health Monday. We're glad that you're joining us. We're doing these series on mental health to elevate the importance of our own mental health in our lives, provide resources, an opportunity for information to be given, and maybe just that relating that you can do of things that are going on in your own life with anxiety and depression and grief. Equal to telling information and giving that information is the permission that we give when we have the opportunity to tell our story. Today is going to be a little different because I have my good friend Paul Aitken here with me, and I think this may be one of your last official tasks that you do as director of music and arts for the Cathedral of the Rockies. Do you think?
I think that's pretty close to. I believe we roll out tomorrow. So.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Well,
which is its own layer of emotion.
It does. And as we've been with the sermon series, we've been encouraged to be vulnerable. So This is going to be a conversation, and who knows where it's going to go. We probably could have 7 episodes and go on and on and on. But I know you have a road to meet soon. Mm-hmm. But I appreciate you doing this.
Thanks for asking.
As I was beginning to think about today, I remembered December, and you and Mackenzie stopped by my house, and we toasted another successful Christmas at the Cathedral.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the surgery that Mackenzie was going to have within the next couple days. And I'll never forget, you sat in my living room and you said, we've cried, we've thought about, we've unpacked all of the possibilities, and we are at peace. And then a few days later, and as the new year came, oh my goodness, 2020 started.
Yeah.
Tell me about that first part. I remember getting the text on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
So tell me what that was like for you.
Well, let's go back just a little bit and describe kind of where we came from.
Right.
On December 2nd, Mackenzie was diagnosed with a brain aneurysm close to the center of her brain, and her surgeon decided that they could easily go in through a femoral artery on the 19th and go ahead and repair that surgically. On the 19th, we had gone through the whole process of the what ifs and what could happen and weighing the pros and cons of saying if we don't repair the aneurysm, this could happen. Her grandmother, her own grandmother, had actually passed away at age 43 from a burst aneurysm. So we felt it was genetically imperative for us to at least go in and try to do a fix. That wasn't even a possibility when her grandmother was 43. So the surgery on the 19th failed, and we were rescheduled for the 30th to go in via open brain surgery through just around her temple area. And on the 30th, a second surgeon went in and again did a half successful attempt at repairing the aneurysm. She was brought out of surgery, reawakened, and we had the conversation about whether we should go ahead and have a third surgery to complete the process. We opted to go ahead and do that. There was another process and procedure that could be that we could go through, and during that third surgery on the 31st, she had a massive stroke, and the doctor came in to the waiting room and sat us all down and said, we were able to repair the aneurysm. However, at 10 a.m. this morning, or approximately 10 a.m. this morning, your wife had a massive stroke, and it will be debilitating. and there will be repercussions for months and years. And our lives came crashing down. We had, we were, you're never quite prepared for that type of news. And the truth of the matter is, it wasn't until I saw her and she began to wake, even a day later, that I realized the magnitude of what was going on. She was truly paralyzed, completely paralyzed on her left side, with no use of her left arm, her left leg, and not able to speak, not truly able to swallow. And so her first task was to breathe on her own and get off the ventilator. So within a couple of days, I remember asking one of the surgeons, there were now 2 surgeons involved, and I asked, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is the stroke? And he said, it's at least a 7. It was a plaque scatter stroke, so it was not one of those types of strokes where you could inject her intravenously and try to dissolve a blood clot. A plaque scatter stroke was plaque inside of a blood vessel, an artery, that becomes dislodged and then goes back further into the brain, and that doesn't dissolve. It simply stays there in those blood vessels in the brain, and remains there for life. So we've had a tremendous challenging year of therapy, and yet I will say that she's done very well. I feel like we are beginning to walk, and 1 mile an hour,
Right.
maybe,
Right.
And
that was just January.
And that was just January.
That was January. And what I heard you say is that the importance of gathering information at that
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
of equipping yourself as much as you
Yeah.
can so that you know. Do you have any recollection? Because so many times when those kind of crises, and I can't even imagine what that was like, but when crisis hits our lives, fortunately, shock kind of enters in, and our
Right.
brains protect us, actually. Were you aware of kind of just moving through that kind of as a maze during that time?
Not really. Our whole family, we were in our lifeboats,
Yeah,
trying
right.
to escape trying to escape the ship, and hoping to find land, something to really grab onto. The grief was palpable. It was truly awful, because we knew that everything would change. Mackenzie's career as a realtor was going to be likely forever eliminated. So our economy had broken. Our everything that we had planned to be normal for the rest of our lives, what is normal, had completely shifted. And Mackenzie describes it as, she went to sleep and woke up in a different body, and Attack of the Body Snatchers, basically, and everything had moved into a parallel universe, that none of which felt real or even like our lives, our previous life.
Almost moved out into somebody else's world, into their life.
It was all the same actors, all the same players, but everything was different.
Did you also, because you've been in music, how long?
Well, all my life.
Yeah.
Here, I've been here almost 20 years.
Right.
And but music became a source of tremendous pain. In fact, I still wrestle with with music. There's so much emotion in music, that my grief is still so close to the surface that
That's it. So the one thing that has fueled you
Yeah.
for all of these years
Yeah.
now is that really vulnerable place.
Yeah.
It takes you.
yeah, it takes me almost too close. The emotion almost always brims over in moments of listening to music or creating music. It's very difficult.
So not only did it affect, you talked about Mackenzie's
Yeah.
livelihood. Music has been your path.
Yeah.
It's been who
Yeah.
you are.
Right.
It's defined you
Right. Right.
for so long, and now that was even.
Yeah. And it's even affected my writing because the way I wrote or what I used to write is different now than the way it was before. So my music sounds different, which is not necessarily bad, but it's sort of like this was Act 1, and now we're in Act 2 of a writing style or a head place for writing. It's just different, and as I sing or conduct, I know that I'm tapping into emotions that are very new and very vulnerable, and so that has changed.
Yes. So every time you step into that,
Yeah.
it is that giving permission again to feel
Yeah.
very, very deeply
Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
how that
Right.
is very much in your heart and
Right.
soul of
Right.
who you are. And as we said at the beginning, that was January.
That was January.
And then February. Tell
Yeah.
me about February.
We Mackenzie and I had Valentine's Day in the hospital, and we were getting to a place where Mackenzie's health was such that she was beginning to enjoy a new normalcy, and a new independence. We were taking her outside and going for walks and enjoying those experiences. And we had an end date. We knew that that February 20th was going to be she was going to be discharged from the hospital. The doctors felt she was good enough and healthy enough to experience the world from a standpoint of home health. And on President's Day, the 17th of January, Mackenzie's mother's birthday, we received a phone call. Actually, it was Mackenzie's dad and I were up at the house taking a look at all the different renovations that we were doing up at the house for Mackenzie's to come home. It was so there was a place of optimism that was there, and we were excited about having her home. And we received a phone call that Caden, our youngest of four boys, was no longer responding to texts, and he was at his dad's, but he had stopped responding. So they were going to send somebody over to do a wellness check on him because he had been wrestling with depression, especially since he had been struggling with depression for years and had been treated for years, but. So Dad went down, and about 10 minutes later, I received a phone call, and Dad said, "Caden's dead, and the police are all here, and he took his own life." So I jumped in the truck, and I think I easily made a land speed record down the hill. Chris's dad was there, and my father-in-law was there, and I just ran over to Chris, and we just sobbed in each other's arms. It was truly one of the most devastating things I've ever been through, and then I had to tell Mackenzie 3 days before she was to be discharged that her youngest boy, our beloved son, was no longer here. And then the whole aftermath of that took place. The fallout of making new decisions, and that's a whole new level of grief and disbelief and challenges and
And I think of even just the roles that you've had to take on when this year began,
Yeah.
that you had no idea about, certainly being a caregiver and the demands
No.
that places on you and the responsibility, and
Yeah.
then a grieving father and a grieving spouse.
yeah, and grieving kids.
Yes.
Just having to go through calling the boys was something I've never I never want to go through again. Nothing like that. That was too much.
When you think back on those moments, what was it that helped you to put one foot in front of the other, or maybe even just find equilibrium in the moment?
Right. We've obviously been steeped in faith. Both of us, Mackenzie and I, have a deep sense of faith that we brought to the experience. That doesn't fix anything. From the standpoint of it's not going to make you feel any less of the pain, any less of the emotion, any less of the grief, any less of the guilt, the what ifs, but at least we've both said this, if we didn't have some type of faith to hang on to, I don't know how we would have I don't know how we would have gotten through it otherwise. I think we would have both spiraled down a life's toilet, and but at least it allowed us to pray together and simply love one another through it.
It kind of tethers you to something
yes,
bigger than you,
yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. And we truly felt so much care and love and grace from doctors and nurses through Mackenzie's healing process, and then just they enveloped us in a virtual cocoon when they found out about Caden. They brought they allowed us to have more than a couple people in Mackenzie's room, and we were able to congregate as a family and basically have all the people in our world that matter the most right there present in that room, so that we could cry and laugh and begin the remembrance process, and planning process, but for that very special, very intimate, very surreal night, we were able to experience the love and grace of those nurses that just made sure that everything was there for us, and that was outside of their standard mission. They don't normally, it's a rehabilitation hospital. Their usual MO is is making sure that
Right.
taking people through the steps necessary
Getting them ready.
Right.
Right.
Death is not necessarily a normal standard process there.
Right.
So even they were grieving with us.
And I remember being at the
Yeah.
church that next morning, and
Yeah.
Wilson coming over,
Yeah.
and the Epworth kids from the high school coming over,
Yep.
and Wilson sit down at the piano.
Mm-hmm. Yep. 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 And music is part of of everybody's healing. Well, at least our family's healing
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, it was so wonderful to see, because it was so planted.
Yeah.
That seed of
Yeah.
music can be such a beautiful expression
Yep.
of the grief.
Mhm.
And I'll just never forget that picture
Yeah.
of they just surrounded the piano,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Wilson
And
played. I
there's-
don't know that I knew Wilson played.
Yeah.
And they brought their flowers,
Yeah.
and they lit
Yeah.
some candles, and for those moments that provided that place of comfort,
Yeah.
because they were belonging
You're right.
to each other.
Right.
And it's kind of that same picture that you just gave in the hospital, that importance of family and love surrounding you
Right.
at those moments.
Right.
And knowing that
Right.
we can do this, but we can't do it alone. We
have to do it together.
have each other
Right.
in tandem
Right.
as we move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And then COVID happened,
Yes.
and all of our lives changed. Do you remember at what point, when it was kind of the perfect storm
Right.
at that point in your life,
Yeah.
all of that came together, but through that you began making some plans to take some steps. Do you
Right.
recall what was going on in your mind as you and Mackenzie talked about retirement from
Right.
ministry? That's
Right.
big.
That's big, and that's its own layer of
That's a whole nother episode.
that's a whole
actually.
nother episode. And by the way, how did we come down here for this conversation without tissues? Really?
And alcohol.
I got coffee.
Yes.
The world shut down February 13th.
Yes.
Sorry, March 13th, 2020, and we we quarantined like everybody else, and Mackenzie's therapies were shut down right away, and interestingly enough, it was one of those scenarios where Mackenzie and I didn't realize this at the time, but it became apparent after a few weeks of quarantining together that we were relearning who each other was. And I was also COVID actually gave me an opportunity to understand exactly how much care Mackenzie was going to need on a full-time basis. It's extensive.
So you have to be there with her from the moment she wakes
up, yeah,
all the way through
yeah,
the day.
right. And I realized that the likelihood that I could do this well, and this well, was probably not going to ever be true. I could do one or the other well, but I probably could not do both caregiving and a full-time downtown job with my normal, whenever things get normal. And so we began having some conversation about what could life look like if we thought outside of the parameters that we've had experienced pre-2020, because everything else has changed. So, and we said, so we began to ask ourselves, what would happen if if I retired from ministry um, earlier than we'd ever thought, and did something completely different in an act two of retirement. And it's and let's be clear, there's nothing. It will be a very full-time act two.
Yeah.
We will be busy.
Right. Well, I always think retirement is that it's not that it's just not an ending.
Right.
It's a moving away from one thing that's
Right.
been your norm,
Right.
towards something
Right.
that you're going to make intentional choices
Sure,
about.
sure. Yeah. And so we started looking at inns in Nova Scotia, Canada. We began to research where in. I grew up in Canada, so it made some sense to and I'd always thought that I might like to retire in Canada. So we began to look across at real estate across Canada to see what was affordable on our budget, or and we began a new discernment process, and we sort of had the time to do that together, and we established that housing prices in the province of Nova Scotia were some of the best in across the nation. So things just began to narrow down, and so we're taking a look at. We'll be heading out this week in order to actually put eyes on the on at least 4 or 5 different properties that we've been looking at and talking to owners about, and I think it will give us at least a new, fresh perspective, and a renewed hope, something else to sort of focus on, think about, pour ourselves into, because I think it's important never to get stuck. I did not want to get stuck in a scenario where we were trying to simply just put bandages on the world that we had, and this gave us a new sense of purpose and optimism, and it's as scary as hell. I'm not gonna lie. We tell people this is all the ings. It is terrifying. It is thrilling. It's just all the ings. But we're going to really live into it, and neither one of us is really good at creating significant failures. So we're not going into this with the idea that this could fail. We're just going to say we're going to try to make this really, really exciting, and really try to make it work and carve out a brand new experience for us. It'll give me a little bit of a sabbatical from music, which is still causes me to live back into my region of grief. I'm aware of that, and it's okay. I feel to sort of stand back from it, and lean into a little bit of gardening and just doing something something different for a while.
Okay.
But I'm still excited about things like Carnegie Hall next year, and I'll be able to get those experiences that way.
And Paul, you are a brilliant composer. And when you're composing a piece, there are measures of rest. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine they have purpose.
They do. They do. Music is comprised of sound and silence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as you're telling the story, I just keep seeing your life and the composition that it has been and still is.
Yeah.
But the permission you're giving yourself to rest from this and pursue some other things that will bring new purpose.
Yeah.
However, I did get an opportunity to go in your trailer last night, and there is a piano in there. Let me just say. Yeah. And so, tell me about what you're still working on,
right?
And how that's going.
Yeah. I am working on a brand new, larger work called, right now it's called A New World Requiem. And the idea there is that after, we know that after COVID, after we pull through the year that is 2020, we will be creating, we will be entering a whole new world that we've never experienced before, in very different ways than a normal moving from this year to this year. We normally, right now we are all hunkered down. We are underground. We are masked. We're doing all sorts of new things in order to protect ourselves from something that is so far beyond our norm. And yet, I know, and I'm so completely hopeful that once we come through this, there will be a new a world that is created anew for us, and we need to be able to musically acknowledge the grief and the isolation and the quarantine, and then take that all the way through to a new place of hope and joy and love for one another and compassion for one another. And that will be that's sort of the thread that I'm trying to draw through this piece that's now already about 7 minutes of probably 30.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, I think it's in Psalms, I think it's 96, that says God gives a new song.
Yeah.
It almost feels like now,
Yeah.
there will be a new song.
There will be a new song.
And wow, that
Yeah.
will be so
Yeah.
amazing, and
Yeah.
we look forward to hearing that. And do you have plans for other compositions, or are they really just kind of out there on hold?
Right now, this is my primary focus. I need to finish writing it this fall, and likely orchestrate it early in the new year, so that we can present it. Well, I am hopeful that we'll get back to singing in the late spring, and because if we can get back to singing, we'll find a renewed voice and a renewed purpose in the world.
Well, so much of what we've talked about, we could spend, as I said at the beginning, entire hours on, because in these few short months of 2020,
Yes.
so much change,
Yeah.
so many pathways that you were traveling have now closed,
Yeah.
but you're finding
Yeah.
new ones.
Yeah.
And taking that rest and risk.
Risk. It's a risk rest.
It's a risk rest. Say that really
Risk rest.
fast,
Uh-huh.
all the way to Canada.
Right.
But thank you for being willing to once again tell the story.
You're
You've
welcome.
already impacted so many lives here through your music, and now, without even knowing this would happen, you've impacted their lives again by your story, by your resilience, by your vulnerability, and your willingness to just stay at the table and continually figure this out.
Well, we have one of the things that Mackenzie and I have talked about a lot is how important it is to tell our story, to tell it very candidly, because we know that we have the responsibility to give other people an opportunity to know that they can feel and they can get through these times in their lives as well. It doesn't mean that you're not going to not feel and experience these things deeply, but it is possible to move through them. You just have to give yourself the time.
Yes, absolutely. And you're doing that.
We are.
And this feels kind of like a benediction a little bit, but every time we do a benediction, it's hope that we return.
Yeah.
And as you have shared with us and given us the word so many times, it is a bye for now.
Bye for now.
And as you and Mackenzie get in the truck with
Yep.
your two cats.
With the two cats.
Let's not forget the two
Yeah,
cats.
clinging to the ceiling.
Yes, clinging to the ceiling is right. And you begin to pull out. I hope you know, as you look in that rear view mirror, that behind you is a family that loves you and cares for you.
We do. We do.
And that you will come back and see us. And our prayer for you, because we know and our faith informs us that God will continually hold you in the palm of his hand. Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.